Broadcasting live from an undisclosed location. This is the TCMMA podcast with your host, Chris Cross.
Whoa!
Dana White privilege.
Let's go, baby! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go, baby!
Dana White privilege. Privilege.
Welcome to the TCMMA podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cross, and it's week 6, Dana White's Contender Series. And this year seems like a marathon. But guess what? We're in the second half. We're breaking down a little bit. UFC 306 this past weekend. A lot of work to do. Well, this past weekend, it's still here. It's still here. And we got a lot of work to do this weekend, and trying to get Contender Series done as well is very difficult. On one end, I love the Contender Series. On the other, I can't wait till this thing is finished and I can get my normal weeks back. Because what happens is we're doing all the predictions for Saturday night. Luckily, there's a few off weeks. We got an off week coming up, which really helps. So we'll make it through. But we're doing all of our predictions normally for week to week, doing the podcast, the live watch parties, all this, and then bam, all of a sudden you got Tuesday night fights. You got the predictions for those, the reactions. It just really, we go into overdrive, and we're certainly in overdrive right now. But luckily, it's coming to an end. Second half is underway. And before the show, I'm like, let me see what's going on with Dana White. Let me see what's in the headlines. Let me see if there's anything to talk about. And I also want to know what was going on with Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Is this thing still on? Yes, it is. This thing is going down. Can't wait for it. Still think Jake Paul wins the fight. But it's going to be at AT&T Stadium, and it's going to be live, and it's going to be packed. And who knows what's going to happen. But you would think Jake Paul would outlast Tyson, although everyone's saying otherwise. But that's neither here nor there. What I ended up finding out shocked me, and that's that Jake Paul, unless this is a hoax, Jake Paul snuck into UFC 306 last night. Went in full disguise and everything. And you say, well, why does he got to go into a disguise? Another thing I didn't know is he's banned by Dana White from entering UFC events. So unbelievable if this is true that Jake Paul snuck into UFC 306. But these are what major MMA news outlets are reporting. And I'm sure he made videos of this, obviously, and he's going to plaster it everywhere, as he should. So, I hate to see a guy be banned. I don't like when someone does something illegal, like sneak into an event they're not supposed to be at, but it is funny as hell, isn't it? Jake Paul, who's got like millions of dollars, has the social media brand, everyone knows his face, and he can still go in disguise and get in. I mean, how can you ban someone from an event if you can't even tell it's them? I mean, it's crazy. So you got that going on. I thought that was kind of funny. That's all we got on Dana White last night. Everything else that we had to say about Dana White has been said, because UFC 306 just happened. He just had his post-fight press conference, so all that is in the past as of right now. So let's get into week 6, but before we do that, let's kind of look and see what's going on here. And I don't think we have the women's divisions up. We don't. Well, there's 2 women flyweights that are now in the UFC. But when you scan around the different divisions, you got 5 bantamweight fighters, including Josias Musasa, who got in last week on a split decision victory. He's 8-0. So you got 5 bantamweights, and then you got a bantamweight main event in week 6. So the bantamweight division is going crazy at the Contender Series. You got 3 featherweights in right now with Jose Delgado, Bogdan Grad, Austin Bashi. And then you look at the middleweight, it's going well too. You got 4 middleweights in right now. And you look at those records, and it's hard to say who's the best, but Marco Tulio, 12-1. As you look at light heavyweight, you got Bruno Lopez, 13-1. And let me go back and see if we can find any big-time records. You got a 14-2 Bogdan Grad at featherweight. You got a pair of 8-0 fighters in Wellmaker and Musasa. So, you're not looking at a bunch of undefeated guys, but you're looking at a bunch of fighters who are very good and could make some noise going forward and have a lot of experience, right? Like you look at welterweight with Gustafsson and Co, both 11-2. So this is what's going on right now. This is where we're at, and we're only in the first half. We're going to continue to track this thing, but I would not be surprised if the bantamweight division continues to add more and more fighters. It's one of the most exciting divisions in the UFC, behind the lightweight division. So you're not seeing a lot of lightweight fighters come out of the Contender Series because that division is so beefed up right now. But the bantamweight division, especially after the loss by O'Malley the other night, and who knows how long Dvalishvili will be up there, it's kind of reopened this division, and there's going to be a free-for-all to get into the top 10, and that's why you see the UFC adding fighters out of the Contender Series. But let's kick this thing off in Fight 5, lightweight division fight. Doesn't get any better than that. You got Dylan Montello, USA, taking on Ahmad Hassanzadeh out of Afghanistan. This is 8-3 versus 10-3. Again, lightweight division fight. Let's get into the first fight right now. In the lightweight division of Dana White's Contender Series, you got Dylan Montello taking on Ahmad Hassanzadeh. And this is going to be a good one. You know, the lightweight division is always a great division to watch. Now, Montello is 8-3, stands at 6 feet 1 inches. Hassanzadeh is 6'2", 1 inch taller. He's 10-3. So let's dig a little bit deeper into Montello first. He is American. In his 8 wins, he's got 5 KOs and 2 submissions. He does have 3 losses, 1 by submission, 2 by decision. The last loss was against Kanan Khrushchevsky. So, you know, we know that's a tough fight. It came at the Contender Series last year, so this guy does have some experience. Now, Ahmad Hassanzadeh, a.k.a. Lion of the Ring, is 10-3, right? He's got 4 KOs, 5 submissions. So look out. He's capable of taking the fight anywhere it goes. Really, both of them are. So keep that in mind. Now, he does have 3 losses. The last one came against Shah Streaker by decision, and Nazim Sadikov, who KO'd him. So he does have experience against UFC fighters. He fought out of Cage Warriors and Tough Enough in his last 2 fights. Now back to his opponent. Again, he's got Dylan Montello's got experience at the Contender Series. He's also fighting at a Cage Fury Fighting Championships. So after the loss last year, he came back February of 2024, just about 6-7 months ago, and beat Nathan Williams by TKO. So he gets a second opportunity. So this is a tough one, really, because both guys are capable of winning. Both guys got 3 losses, so they're not perfect. And, you know, it's American versus Afghanistan. So it's going to be an interesting fight. I'm going to lean towards Ahmad Hassanzadeh. I think the level of competition is there. He doesn't have the experience like his opponent does in terms of the Contender Series. So that would favor Dylan Montello. But I just think Ahmad Hassanzadeh is fighting some good fighters like Nazim Sadikov. That's got to pay off. He loses that, loses another one at LFA, good competition. Then comes back at Cage Warriors, gets the win, and Tough Enough. So I'm going to lean towards Ahmad Hassanzadeh to get the win, but I think it's going to go to a decision. So I'm not sure either guy is going to get in because you need a big finish, I think, on this card for sure. As you get deeper into the season, it's not as easy to get a contract. So look for Hassanzadeh to win, but by decision, in my opinion, to move to 11-3 here. Lightweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, so just, I mean, it's simple. Sometimes we're looking for an angle in these fights because we don't know the fighters as well. I know people will weigh in sometimes, you know, when I make the mistake of reading comments or the chat room, and people will say, man, you got to do your research, man. There's like 600 UFC fights every year when you look at the Ultimate Fighter Contender Series and just the regular Saturdays. There's only so much research you can do. So you got to look for an angle and make a decision. And sometimes these are simple decisions. When you start doing your research and you start overthinking things, that's when you start to make mistakes. And that's what people do when they're putting money up. They over-research, over-analyze, and they go the wrong way. I just tend to make a pick and stick with it. And I like Hassanzadeh simply because he's got better competition. It's real simple. I mean, real simple. Now, as we move forward into fight number 4, it only gets better as you go up the card. This is going to be a middleweight fight between Atiba Galtier, 5-1, taking on the undefeated Yura Nato. He's 6-0. This is Cameroon versus Japan. And the middleweight division, like the bantamweight, middleweight's number 2 right now. They got 4 fighters already in. I think in both of these first 2 fights, you got to get a finish to get in. But let's get into this one right now. In the middleweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Yura Nato taking on Atiba Galtier. Nato, I think that's how you say it anyway. He's 6-0, right? He's got 3 KOs, 2 submissions in those 6 wins. He's 6 feet tall. He's just 28 years old. His opponent is 5-1. Listed at 135 pounds, that can't be right, but he's fighting out of Cameroon. In his 5 wins, he's got 4 KOs, 1 decision, and he did lose once by decision to Glenn Williams back in 2022, but since then he's won 4 in a row. Nato, on the other hand, again, has never lost. He's fighting out of Pancrase, which sounds like a regional promotion. He's been there since the beginning, and he's won all 5 fights. So this is a tough one to predict. I mean, at least his opponent, I mean, he did lose, but he did fight at Titan FC 82 and won by KO. Other than that, these guys are fighting in some very small, I don't want to say weak promotions because I don't know much about them, but I've never heard of them. So that tells me that they're somewhat smaller than most of the other fighters on this card who are fighting out of like LFA and Cage Fury and, things like that, places you heard of. These guys are fighting in smaller promotions. So they're both going to need a big finish in order to move into the UFC. But I'm going to lean towards the Japanese Yura Nato because he's undefeated. 3 KOs, 2 submissions, 1 decision, never lost. His opponent, Galtier, did lose against a guy we never heard of, so that's concerning. Not to say Nato wouldn't have lost to the same guy, but the Japanese fighter seems like he's at the right stage in life. He's 28 years old. He's a solid 6 feet tall. He's going to be a big middleweight, and that tells me that he's likely to win this fight. Now, when you look at Galtier, this guy is huge too, right? He's like a middleweight version of Francis Ngannou when you see his picture. So this guy is going to be ripped up and very capable of winning, but I need to see more to make a prediction for him. Yura Nato just seems like he's rolling right now, and it could be a tough fight, but I like him to grind out a victory. It might be by decision, not enough to get you in the UFC. But either way, Yura Nato wins his fight, remains undefeated, moves to 7-0 here, middleweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. So again, another fight that leads to a very tough prediction because the fighters are new. You got a 5-1 versus 6-0. There's not a lot to go off of. You got to make a decision. And in this case, we're going to go with the undefeated fighter, but I am concerned with the size of Galtier. Of course, when they stand face to face, it'll be a little, the pictures could trick you, but there's no doubt Galtier is a big dude. And maybe I'll pay for this prediction, but luckily Nato is a slight favorite here. And hopefully he can get the job done. But either guy who wins is going to need to finish. We already got 4 middleweights in, and that's why we're tracking it this year. It helps understand, the UFC's looking at this too. And it's like, we need this many in this division, this many in this division, and it's a numbers game. And as you get into the second half, it's a little bit harder to get in, right? Because Dana White's going to be more generous early. He's going to want to show the fighters later, like, look, if you get a finish, you're in. And only one guy this season got a finish and didn't get in, and that's Yasri Belgardi. He didn't get in. So yeah, we'll go with Japan in that one. Let's go Yura Nato. See what happens. Now as we move up into the welterweight division, you got Joey Hart 6-1 versus Benjamin Bennett 6-1. This is American versus American. Joey Hart's a tall guy at 6'3". He'll be punching downward, but he's going to be a little more lanky, right? He's going to be a little bit more lanky. And let me make sure I got this right. Or it might just be backwards. Let me look at this again. Yeah, it's just backwards. That's all right. So here we go with fight number 3. In the welterweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Benjamin Bennett taking on Joey Hart. So this is going to be an interesting fight. You got American versus American. And to go even further, you got Missouri versus Minnesota. I like it. So beginning with Benjamin Bennett, he's just 29 years old, 6 feet tall. He's actually 3 inches shorter than Joey Hart, aka the Hitman. So 29, 6 feet tall. He's 6-1. So in his 6 wins, he's got 4 KOs, 1 submission. He was KO'd once by Trey Waters. That was at LFA 133 back in 2022. Trey Waters worked his way into the UFC. Since then, he fought once more in LFA. Well, he's won 3 in a row. But most recently at LFA 186 in June of 2024, he won by unanimous decision. Now, Joey Hart is 7-0 with 6 KOs, right? They're basically both undefeated if you take away the Trey Waters fight from his opponent. In his last fight, he beat Tyler Scott at LFA 185. Looks like the same card, June of 2024, but he won by KO. Wonder if Dana White was there and saw both these guys win incredible fights. But the bottom line is this guy's undefeated. He's fought in many different promotions, fighting in LFA twice, winning both by KO or TKO. And I'm sure Benjamin Bennett is a good fighter, but I'm going to lean towards Joey Hart here to get the job done. You know, the guy's undefeated, and he KOs his opponent almost every time. I think he's going to win this fight by KO in the first round, jump on top of the octagon, talk smack to Dana White and tell him to let him in, and Joey Hart will get into the UFC with a big finish. That's my opinion. Throw out the numbers here. Joey Hart is just going to be better. Welterweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. And that was a simple prediction. I just see some things with Joey Hart, that I like better than Benjamin Bennett. Can't really go wrong, right? It's American versus American. Will these guys need a finish? Not necessarily. The welterweight could use some more fighters. You only have a couple of guys in so far this season. They just need to put on a great show. It can't be like 40-40 in significant strikes, but if they go 80, 90, 100 significant strikes, and a guy wins by decision, they're very likely to still get in to the UFC. But look for Joey Hart to dominate here and hopefully get the finish. Now, as we work our way up into the co-main event, we got a last name we've heard of before in Teixeira. Talison Teixeira takes on Arthur Lopez. Heavyweight division, big boys. 6-0 versus 6-1. Brazil versus Brazil. Oh boy. So there's no angle here, right? We see a Brazilian at this level and we usually take them. So good news is we're taking a Brazilian here, but who knows which one, because they both look pretty good to me. Let's get into it right now. In the heavyweight division at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Talison Teixeira. I know you heard that last name before, taking on Arthur Lopez. So a lot of people talking about this fight because Teixeira, Brazilian, 6-0. Lopez, Brazilian, 6-1. Goes by the nickname John Jones. So I like that. That's interesting. Highly interesting that his nickname is John Jones. Imagine if he rose to the top and you had John Jones versus John Jones one day. That's crazy. But anyway, let's get to it. Teixeira, 6-0, 5 by KO, 1 by submission. He's fighting out of LFA the last 2 times out. That means he's facing some good competition, and he won both by KO or TKO. Now, Lopez does have 1 loss against Jonathan Carvalho by submission back in 2015. So you might as well forget that. But since 2015, he's only had 5 fights. Only 1 fight since 2018. So that's interesting. He beat Daniel Butcher by TKO at Souza Combat MV. So why the long layoff? That doesn't make much sense when you got, your opponent Teixeira fighting twice in this year already. So that tells me that Teixeira has no octagon rust. He's fighting at LFA 175 in January, then 183 in May, right? So he's had enough time off to prepare for this fight. Now, Lopez is well rested. I mean, he's had 1 fight in 6 years, so I can't go with him, especially Brazil on Brazil here. I'm going to lean towards Talison Teixeira to get the win, and to get the win in a big way. I expect him to get a first-round finish here and lock up a spot in the UFC. Now, he's listed at 205, so it seems like he's moving up, so weight could be an issue. So keep an eye on that. But the guy's undefeated for a reason. I look for him to win by first-round KO to move to 7-0. In my opinion here, heavyweight division, Dana White's Contender Series. And again, that's the part where we don't know these fighters very well, right? I see the weight of, uh, what was it, 185, and then he's moving up. So it's very important, or not 185, 205, but moving up to heavyweight. So that's going to be an important factor. Will Teixeira be too lanky for Lopez, who's more of a bona fide heavyweight, right? So we'll see. Now, here on ESPN, they got Teixeira listed at 255. So maybe that's a mistake on whatever I was looking at, whether it be Sherdog or uh, Topology or whatever, had them listed at 205. So it doesn't matter. Both guys are heavyweights, and it's going to be an interesting fight. And listen, it's Brazil on Brazil, but I'll take Talison Teixeira to win this fight. He's undefeated, and you know the dude's 6'8". Who doesn't want a 6'8" big dog in the UFC? But he's got to get the finish here, right? People don't want a heavyweight fight that goes to a decision. They want finishes, and that's going to be important. Now, as we shift into the main event, this is a bantamweight main event, and there's already 5 fighters in the bantamweight division. It seems like the UFC is destined to add as many bantamweight fighters as they can. You got Aaron Tall, 8-0, taking on Elijah Smith, 6-1, New Zealand versus USA. Let's jump into this one. Your main event right now. In the bantamweight division, your main event at Dana White's Contender Series, you got Aaron Tao versus Elijah Smith. So let's begin with Aaron Tao in this one. We don't even have an age. We know he's 5'3". He's 8-0 in his 8 wins. He's got 5 KOs, 1 submission, 2 decisions. So the guy is unbeaten. Fighting out of Extreme Fighting Championships, it looks like all the way back since 2021. And this guy is a finisher. He can finish you on the ground or on the feet. On the other hand, Elijah Smith, American, right? So this is New Zealand versus American. He's fighting out of Colorado. He's got 6 wins, 4 by KO, 1 submission. Does have 1 loss, but that was against Reyes Cortez Jr., who we know is a UFC fighter, and that was by KO. So you can look at this as virtually both guys being undefeated now. He is fighting at a Fury Fighting Championships. In his last fight, that was a TKO victory. Before that, it was Battle MMA Championships and Colorado Combat. So he's fighting more out of regional promotion. So he's got something to prove here in this one. And both of them are really fighting out of regional championships. But I'm going to lean towards Aaron Tao to get the victory here. I do like that Elijah Smith has, I don't like that he has a loss, but at least it's a loss against a good fighter, and it did give him some experience. So you could say that on that end. But Aaron Tao has just been too impressive. Again, 5 KOs in 8 fights, 1 submission. It shows that he's well-rounded and can win the fight wherever it goes. And again, he's a finisher. So I like him to get the finish here, get the contract. Big fight. Bantamweight division has already had like 4 or 5 contracts already. So you're going to need a good performance here to get the job done and get in. But it's clear that the UFC wants to beef up the bantamweight division. So a finish will get you in. And that's what Aaron Tall will do, in my opinion, to move to 9-0. Bantamweight division. Dana White's Contender Series. And can you imagine if Aaron Tall does get the finish? We got 6 bantamweights already. 6 already. That's like an average of 1 per week. I mean, we're looking at potentially 8 to 10 bantamweight fighters. The UFC is doing this on purpose, right? They're setting up fights for what they need. They need bantamweight fighters. And the whole division is reloaded. I mean, you're just going to see a surge of guys from the Contender Series coming in 2025 in the bantamweight division. And it's going to be exciting to see what they can do. In this one, I'd like to see Aaron Tall get the finish and get in and continue to build that number. And then look forward to seeing these guys in the UFC in 2025. But listen, we reached the end of the show, so you know what that means? We met our goal for this weekend. We got through UFC 306, through the live watch party, through the reaction podcast, now week 6 Dana White's Contender Series, and we're headed towards a week off. So if you follow us on YouTube, if you don't, youtube.com/@TCMMA podcast, we're going to be pumping out predictions beginning Wednesday. I mean, all this week we're pumping out predictions. I'm going to try to finish up Contender Series, as many picks as we can, get into the UFC next UFC fight night. which is going to be UFC Paris, and then UFC 307 is the following week. We got another pay-per-view just 3 weeks away. So lots of big things coming over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. But for now, it's your boy Chris Cross. Hope you have a great day, and God bless. As always, peace.